When Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn jumped ship, rival fans rejoiced, as it now seemed that one of America's most cursed franchises was returning to form. And the blows kept coming, with the sudden retirement of franchise center Frank Ragnow. From the cusp of glory back to the pits of despair, Detroit just isn't built for winning football. Or is it? Since the commencement of the Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell era, all Detroit fans know is winning football and smash hits in the offseason. And despite some concerning departures, everything points to this offseason being another good one for the boys in Honolulu Blue. So, yep, the NFL still has a Detroit Lions problem. Detroit's rise from upstart rebuild to NFC powerhouse has been a long process, reaching its zenith in the 2024 season. It seemed that every single week there was a new Lions play going viral for its ingenuity and effectiveness. Dan Campbell's rousing locker room speeches could send a shiver down anyone's spine. The once discarded Jared Goff was an MVP candidate, and the team felt predestined for their first Super Bowl appearance. The only way was up, with 3 consecutive seasons of improving by 3 or more wins, culminating in a 15-2 record. However, the Super Bowl run was stopped dead in its tracks in the divisional round, and both coordinators, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, were among the hottest names on the head coaching market. So it was far from a shock for Detroit to lose both men early in the offseason. Neither of their replacements, Calvin Shepard or John Morton, came into their roles with the same prestige, and the first glimpses of Detroit in the preseason haven't exactly been promising. But when it comes to evaluating the Lions' ability to bounce back and remain competitive, there are plenty of reasons for Lions fans not to panic. Chief among them, a winning culture. That may sound cliche, but to the city of Detroit, that means everything. You see, up until 2014, the franchise was owned by one of Henry Ford's grandsons, William. After failing to make his mark at the family company, William took full control of the Lions in 1963, and in the ensuing 50 years, due to his inexplicable loyalty to losing personnel, the team made the playoffs just 10 times without ever getting a whiff of the Super Bowl. When William passed away in 2014, his wife, Martha, took ownership of the team, and the suffering continued. Despite the Ford family's long-standing relevance in the city of Detroit, the Lions faithful wanted them out at all costs. Generations of fans had known nothing but failure, and the only consistent presence in that time span had been the Fords at the center of it all. At the age of 94, Martha finally transferred ownership to her daughter, Sheila Ford Hamp, in 2020. This is where things finally start to turn around. Mediocrity wasn't going to cut it for Sheila. One of her most significant points of departure from family tradition is that she is not afraid to get rid of people who lose, and instead surrounds herself in the front office with the best available footballing minds. Her first order of business was firing GM Bob Quinn and head coach Matt Patricia, who had each tried and failed to make the franchise competitive. After a 5-11 2020 season, Brad Holmes came in as GM, and Dan Campbell followed as the new head coach in early 2021, setting the foundations for the Detroit Lions team we see today. But it wasn't all easy. Decades of poor management from the Fords meant that even with Sheila's increased involvement in the team, the Motor City faithful preferred a sale of the franchise, and let it be known to her at every opportunity. Nevertheless, one of Sheila's best hires, Brad Holmes, has maintained a remarkably high hit rate as far as his draft picks and trades in each offseason since. The most remarkable of these came early in his tenure, sending Matthew Stafford to the Rams in exchange for Jared Goff, 2022 and 2023 first-rounders, and a third-round pick. This set the wheels in motion for a full-blown rebuild. In the 2021 draft, Holmes hit big on Penei Sewell and fourth-rounder Amon-Ra St. Brown. Although it took them 13 weeks to win a football game, Sheila Ford stuck with her hires. Aiden Hutchinson, Jamison Williams, and Kirby Joseph were all fantastic additions to the roster in 2022, but a 1-6 start had the Lions fandom questioning Sheila's decision-making. Was she guilty of the same blind loyalty that hampered both of her parents in years past? Could a Ford ever run this team successfully? According to Detroit writer Bill Morris, Sheila walked into the practice facility in the middle of that season and said, "I understand it's going to be tough, and we're going to stick with these guys. The Lions only lost 2 of their remaining 10 games to finish above 500 for the first time in 5 years, narrowly missing out on the playoffs. In the 2023 draft, they won big with Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch, all of whom were able to make immediate impacts as rookies in a stunning 12-5 season where they clinched their first division title in 30 years. Upon their return to the playoffs, the Lions stunned the nation with an NFC Championship run, where they fell just short to the 49ers. But the loss didn't matter. The rebuild was complete. The Detroit Lions were more than just a feel-good story, they were now Super Bowl contenders. Although none of the 2024 rookies had huge impacts, the Lions improved even further to 15 wins, the most in franchise history. The aforementioned defeat in the first round of the playoffs and the loss of both coordinators do sound damning. But as you can see, ever since Sheila Ford took over, there has been a strong track record of improvement that suggests the Lions will be just fine. Turning the Lions into a winning franchise wasn't simply a shift in mentality, it was a complete reshuffling of the organization, but it's worked to magnificent effect. Ford's brain trust in Detroit has epically turned things around in just 4 years, so who's to say that they won't be able to keep the ball rolling in 2025? Even when some of their appointments this offseason were met with skepticism, it's important not to lose sight of the trust they've earned with the fans by way of their overwhelming success thus far. Let's start by looking at Kelvin Shepard, the defensive coordinator tasked with replacing Aaron Glenn. Shepard was an internal promotion from linebackers coach, and his familiarity with the players and organization should bode well for his adjustment to the added responsibility he will have in 2025. It may sound tough to improve upon a defense that finished 7th in points against last season, but this unit will inevitably be stronger in 2025. Aaron Glenn dealt with an unprecedented injury crisis last season. Marcus Davenport, Derek Barnes, and star D-end Aiden Hutchinson suffered season-ending injuries in the early goings, before other important starters such as Aleem McNeil, Alex Anzalone, Malcolm Rodriguez, and Carlton Davis each missed significant time later down the stretch. Even with the pressure of being a first-time coordinator, Shepard is cool as can be. I want to give credit to Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn because it's exactly what I thought it would be, he said of the coordinator role. And I'm humbly saying that. I don't feel overwhelmed. With utmost faith in his assistant coaches, it's clear that Shepard's 4 seasons with the Lions organization have been more than sufficient training for his new post. In training camp, he singled out second-year corner Terrion Arnold as one of the most improved players, while claiming that Hutchinson has come back from his leg injury as an even better player than he was before it. Whether or not Hutch comes back as an even more superhuman athlete remains to be seen. But all the Lions need is a healthier defense, and Kelvin Shepard won't have to worry about incessant comparisons to his predecessor. One man who certainly will is John Morton, a far more experienced offensive coordinator who has colossal Ben Johnson-shaped shoes to fill. Detroit's offense has been a top 5 unit for the past 3 seasons, and a lot of that comes down to personnel. But just as much credit goes to the scheme. Johnson's creativity and collaboration with quarterback Jared Goff is what truly made this team tick. He's been a part of the organization since 2019, and he knows the offense's strengths and personnel inside and out, a degree of familiarity that will be hard to replace. John Morton joins from Denver, off a thrilling season as Bo Nix's passing game coordinator, but also knows this Detroit team fairly well. In 2022, he served as offensive assistant for the Lions. Therefore, he's familiar with Johnson's scheme and most of the current players. Above all, he's a Michigander himself, one of many on this team, including Hutchinson, and one of Morton's most exciting young rookies. But before we talk about the talent that has arrived via the draft, it's important to evaluate where the holes in the roster were. The Lions' offensive line was one of the biggest losers of this offseason. Right guard Kevin Zeitler was off to Tennessee early in free agency, while franchise center Frank Ragnow suddenly retired in July of 2025. Ragnow had been the starter for 7 years and was not just an important piece of the O-line, but a cornerstone of the franchise, who was going to be tough to replace whenever he decided to call it a day, although nobody thought that day would come before he even turned 30. On defense, it was mostly a question of depth everywhere. but especially in the trenches, as last season exposed the shallowness of the roster relative to their elite starters. Cornerback Carlton Davis was the most notable loss in free agency, but he was immediately replaced by DJ Reed at a lesser price, who is certainly capable of filling in. Kirby Joseph became the highest paid safety in the league after enjoying a career year in 2024, with the likes of linebacker Derek Barnes and defensive end Marcus Davenport returning to Detroit as well. They spent their first-round pick on D-tackle Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, who is a fantastic run defender who should beef up the interior of Detroit's line. Ironically, Williams says that his welcome to the NFL moment came at the hands of the Lions' second-round pick, guard Tate Ratledge. Ratledge was drafted before Ragnow called it a day, but Brad Holmes had been made aware that the center was considering his options before draft night. As a result, Detroit was able to get a steal at 57th overall, with Ratledge getting most of his reps thus far at center, impressing those present at training camp. Detroit's next pick came at the top of the third, selecting boyhood Lions fan Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas. His family's reaction to "Thank you, Mrs. Ford" makes a lot more sense now. The wideout shot up draft boards late and showed glimpses of promise thus far in preseason, suggesting he could see some snaps early. Detroit then went for O-line depth with Miles Frazier out of LSU in the 5th, before taking edge rusher Ahmed Hassanin out of Boise State in the 6th. Calvin Shepard has openly praised Hassanin's work ethic and performance in training camp thus far, as he, much like Tesla, could be seeing more snaps than initially anticipated come September. In the 7th, Holmes and company wrapped up with the Georgia duo of safety Dan Jackson and wideout Dominic Lovett, rounding out another Detroit draft day masterclass. There were fewer flashy picks this time around than in previous classes, but there's no doubting Holmes' draft pedigree. Again, it's important to remember that these same people who turned this team around from 3 wins to 15 are still in charge. Even with a bleak end to last season, there's plenty of winning pedigree and young talent entering this building, meaning the new era of dominance, which began with the arrival of Sheila Ford, has everything it needs to carry on. The rebuild is much bigger than clever roster construction, though. It was a redefinition of what Detroit football means, altering every fiber of the organization's DNA. Look, it's hard to get any better than 15 regular season wins, but with a half-decade of momentum at their backs, there's no telling what their ceiling actually is, which makes these Detroit Lions a huge problem for the NFL. But what do you think? Will the Lions come back stronger in 2025? Let us know in the comments.